thank you all for coming this evening or this morning, wherever you happen to be. And this talk is one that kind of came to mind recently for us, and it's the idea of how we sometimes fall into the trap, or fall into the trap maybe for even a whole lifetime, of having our practices be more of an escape than something other than an escape. And so we wanted to kind of explore what that idea is about and what we mean by that, and then possibly how you can recognize if that's a phenomenon that's happening to you, because it happens to kind of anyone who starts practicing sometimes, that the yoga becomes something other than what it might potentially be, a little less vital than it might be.
Yeah. Less happy, less vital.
Yeah.
And less useful.
Less useful.
Yeah.
And so, we started thinking about, well, what does it really mean to have yoga as an escape? And in fact, truthfully, when you come to yoga, and if you can remember that far back in your own experience with yoga, we end up going to yoga for various different reasons. You might, and so some of the reasons we go are, in a sense, they're an escape. Like you have a pain in your posterior or your back or your neck, and you go to yoga, in a sense, to escape that pain, or to find a relief from that pain. Or personally, for me, one of the reasons I started yoga was I had a lot of stress in my life. And so in a sense, I was escaping from my stress, and I didn't really necessarily have that in mind, but when I first went, but I knew I was stressed, I knew yoga might help. And then very quickly what starts to happen is that you start to not really see properly what it is that has brought you there to begin with. I mean, a true escape might be you're running down the road and a lion's chasing you, or the cops are chasing you, and you wind up in a yoga room because you took the wrong turn. But for most of us, hide there for 10 years.
Yeah, they're actually, I've known some
That's
people
happened.
like that. Yeah, hiding from
Isn't
the
that
cops.
how you got there?
The Vietnam War.
Yeah,
But that's a whole nother story.
it's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
But so you wind up in yoga, and then so there's this first thing where you go there and you have something you're wanting either relief from or something you want to achieve. And then you find yourself in this yoga situation, doing chanting or pranayama or asana or meditation or whatever it is you're doing. And there's this kind of honeymoon phase where you really are feeling as though there's this sort of wonderful period of something unusual that you might not have expected that happens, usually, if the yoga is good. And even if the yoga, or you're not doing it well, or the yoga isn't being taught properly, often we just have this period where, wow, it feels like when I'm in my real life, I'm here and there's stress, or there's too much to do, or I've got pain. And then when I'm in yoga, I can escape that. And what starts to happen over time is what motivated us to get there becomes less real, less every moment of that particular circumstance becomes less sort of in the moment for us, and it becomes a concept. And then the yoga itself, what we are doing and what we assume we will get from the yoga, that also starts to become a concept. And so we end up in a quite a rapid sort of way. We can very often end up having a good motivation to be there, and then conceptualizing what it is we are going to get need to get, need to avoid, and then conceptualizing what it is the yoga actually is, rather than seeing the things as they are arising right before our eyes. And so that's how the process of it turning from something where you are entering into this sort of realm of the mystery of yoga, and then you can get trapped by your mind or your concepts of who you are and what you are achieving and what yoga itself is. And that can take lifetimes to weed
That's
yourself
what they say.
through.
Lifetime.
I'm counting my lifetimes on that.
Yeah. So, and
So the conceptualization of what it is we mean by yoga is where we start looking at how yoga turns into an escape mechanism.
yeah, and it ceases to make, it doesn't seem to work anymore. And all of these complexities come out, and you kind of flatline, or you gradually go downhill into some sort of difficult situation with the yoga.
And you'd come to yoga in a way to get out of conditioned existence, samsaric everyday life. And then, instead of the yoga inspiring your samsara, yoga becomes actually a main source of samsara or conditioned existence.
It can actually increase your suffering by a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so initially, we're looking for, as you were saying, if you have pain or sickness, it's a very good thing to do. It might not be the ultimate cure, but it certainly helps, and it certainly allows you to then be intelligent and pursue, whatever is available through, the release of sickness. And there's so many types. And then also just like depression, sadness.
Isolation.
Yeah, isolation. Particularly these days.
Yeah.
People feel isolated and they go to yoga and all of a sudden there are other people there, and generally nice, and community forms. And so the community actually is... And then communities, of course, after you get to know everybody, they become complex again. It's just like a yoga retreat. You go and there's an optimal time, and you're meditating with all these people, and you're doing walking meditation, sitting meditation, and of course you're not supposed to be looking around at everybody, but you can't help it because that's natural. Your mind does that, and then pretty soon you know everything. You have all of these favorites and all of these complaints, and you're quite absorbed, and you're off and running. And so in terms of the descriptions of classical yoga, and I'm thinking initially of in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, the kind of the Patanjali sit down, and here's how this is how you make the correct seat to sit on, and this is how you sit straight, and then you watch your breath, and you control your mind, and you just concentrate. And in the Gita, Krishna said, you want to see me in all beings, and it sounds wonderful, and you let go of all desire, and you truly are brahmacharya, and you're always with. And Arjuna, of course, is he has some difficult problems going on, and he hears this description, and he's just like, the mind is like the mind is as difficult it's so difficult to control. It's like trying to control the storm. And I just remember this one line. He says, and this is where a huge hint is dropped. I forget which verse it is. Chanchalahi mana Krishna the mind is just so difficult to control. Then it's like, it's Vayu, it's just like trying to control the wind. And controlling the wind is hard. I don't know. I don't know if you're having weather situations wherever you are, but apparently the wind is difficult to control, as is global warming, as is or volcanoes and tornadoes and but it's a hint that wind is also that which is right in front of you. It's the experience of what is actually arising right in front of you, that your yoga idealism, and even if you have a great teacher, and of course more likely if your yoga teacher isn't really that good, you're ignoring what's happening, even the difficulty of your own mind acting crazy as you're trying to practice. You're kind of ignoring that too. And that's...
Yeah, and this is, it's the nature of mind to conceptualize things in this way.
Yeah.
And then to reduce things to the picture that you've made of them,
Yeah.
and then fall back into either sort of being stuck and wanting to form everything so that it fits with your idea of what you think things should be, or so that it sort of props you up in your inability to be there with what is right
Excellent.
before your eyes. And in the Gita as well, this is where there is the description of what, when you go through all these different complex things, that really the yoga is something that shows us the ordinary.
Yeah. And we come to yoga for every kind of reason. There are classical reasons. One is you come, artha, because you are just, you want something. You've got a goal. Mm-hmm. But then they have what they call a person who's jigyasya, who's more of an intellectual, like an academic. And they love just... And they can take pleasure in just the curiosity, because it's, particularly if it's a different culture dominant. And then there are those who come and their motive transfers into, they want actually power and fame and maybe some money too. None of us would, of course, be that. And then the person who's jnani, a jnani or a wise person, is, that's the one who's probably has less, but even that person, they come and they get confused. And it's just the nature of, of their mind.
And in a sense, we, as individuals, we sort of cycle through these different types of aspects of being, like going for reasons that might have greed or something like that, or the idea of the wise person, which really is sort of an innocence, where people come to something like yoga in a state of extreme innocence, where and it's when you don't have an aim in mind, when you don't have a goal in mind, when the innocence that then allows you to cultivate a sense of wisdom starts to manifest, because there is the capacity within the human experience to have innocence and to have, through that, a beginning taste of wisdom. And then the wisdom is sort of brought to light by the practices, by the study of yoga, and by the interfacing with others through the yoga.
Yeah. And it's often not as easy as it sounds, because the request is, because many, many traditions teach, well, what we want, what is really is we want wisdom, which is the cessation of suffering. And of course, then they'll define suffering as more than just like pain and stuff, because it turns out that, as in the Buddhist tradition, sarvam dukkam, everything, to somebody who's done a lot of yoga, everything is suffering. Even going to heaven, or even going to a really nice beach party, or a real,
I didn't know you would like that.
I was going or to the Grateful Dead concert they just had in Boulder 2 weeks ago. It was huge, which we didn't go to. There's still it's impermanent, and it doesn't really address, the deep mind, and so this suffering begins. And so what often happens is even the person coming with a good motive, they become idealistic you can't help but become, at least, for part of your practice every day, you're being idealistic. I'm going to balance my nostrils. I'm going to open the central channel. I'm going to turn the crown of my head purple because I'm going to visualize a special purple goddess. And these are just a few of the things. And often what happens doesn't match up with the ideal exactly. Or I had a flash the other day of the clear light, and I took a photo of it with a selfie of it too. And I'm trying to reproduce the experience of clear light. And what I'm happening now, it's different. And so and I'm just thinking of Arjuna's difficulty. And so in chapter 7, the beginning of it is very interesting, because Krishna totally shifts gears, from this extreme idealism. And he just says, let's kind of look at what's going on, even with the difficulties you're having. And he makes this one statement, rasoham apsukanteya, I am the taste, the rasa of water. And so Arjuna was worrying about, all of these gods and the millions and billions of lifetimes that he and others are suffering. And Krishna says, hey, over here, I'm the flavor of water. And then I am the fragrance, I'm the sweet smell of the earth.
And in that context, obviously, I mean, Krishna is really describing himself as the residue from a healthy yoga practice, that's what yoga actually is, when it is not an escape. It is the capacity to really wake up and be there with the taste of water, with the brilliant sun, or
right, with the sensations, which are usually completely ignored. The residue of, your distress or your angry rant at yourself for being angry. I always come back to that.
I know you always come back.
And and we tend to ignore the actual vayu, or the sensations which are arising in front of us. And so in good yoga practice, the instruction, of course, is, hey, just notice what's arising, even if it's a distressed mental state. If you can notice it, it's part of what Krishna says, it's part of Prakriti. Mm-hmm. And Prakriti is this wonderful, divine, tricky, it's a wonderful thing. And he said, it's more or less, trust me, it's wonderful. And he says, not only is it, the obvious Prakriti, which is, like the 5 elements, which I guess scientists have run that with their, how many they got now? 108, 112, elements. But
They were
it's
good when they had 108, and then they had to up it.
yeah, they had to up the elements with these. Science always does it. So it's more than just the five senses and the mind. But he also points out that the entire experience of being an individual, what they call Atman, is also Prakriti. So the experience of mind, that's also Prakriti, that you can look at in awe. And this is what's difficult, because what the mind has done, in this more subtle realm, it's done what it's made thoughts. It's reduced everything to thoughts. I have a theory of you, and I have a theory of me, and I have theories of even the world. And particularly when I do it to myself and to other beings, I'm making a kind of a story of me. And in the story of me, I push into the unconscious the things I don't want me to be, which sometimes is positive. Like if I have a really negative view of myself, I don't see the really positive parts. And what's more famous, though, is somebody has a really positive view of themselves, and the really negative is pushed into the unconscious. And whatever is in the unconscious is then projected, as in psychology, onto other people.
Yeah.
And so and the classic thing that we work with, well, there are many, but is all of these demonic deities in the different traditions. And some of them are jokesters, and some of them are just idiots, and some of them are really mean and dangerous. But we're unable, but because we associate the emotion and the actual sensation of them, we don't allow ourselves to actually feel most of what we, the sensations that come with all of our different fantasies about what the world is.
And so the wrathful deities are really presented as part of the iconography as a reminder that for each of us, we have these aspects, and that they are really important to be able to allow to manifest. And when they do manifest, it is actually even more important to then recognize that they are simply manifestations that come in space without projecting them onto others. And the same thing that we do with our projections of who we see ourselves to be, if we're a narcissist or whatever, that we project that onto others, and that doesn't seem like an evil thing to do, especially if you're a narcissist. But what the teaching really is that all of us have those tendencies. That's why we have the word narcissist, narciss, from Greek mythology, etc., is that we all have these tendencies, and it's important to let them manifest, and then without projecting them onto
so
others.
It's the others that that's the key word, I think.
And in terms of escaping through yoga, what ends up happening is those types of those aspects of ourselves that are maybe the hidden shadow sides, when they come to light, or when something like the pain in the neck comes to light, it becomes solid and real and more important than what is actually right there before us. And so the problem with that is that you cannot allow things to change when you have made them solid. You cannot see how things evolve and change. And it pulls you out of the moment into the conceptual world.
Yeah, because the ego wants you to be, my ego wants me to be solid and eternal. The solid and eternal Number one. Okay.
Good luck.
That's all. Yeah,
Good
I'm
luck.
working on it. And it's frustrating at times.
Yeah.
And but the whole teaching, the yoga teaching is that all of this is just this composition of this ever-changing, empty of self, made of the three gunas, prakriti, which is actually very, absolutely astonishing. In its depth and beauty is unspeakable, and it's really difficult because it almost behaves magically, and so that's like the teaching of the Gita. Only someone who has love for other beings can deal with this divine prakriti, and, which includes it includes the mind, but not just your mind, but mind in general, the kind of the big net that is mind,
Yeah.
and that is language, that connects all species and all the planets and all the galaxies. And quite amazing. And it's just like the fascia in the body, which is this, the fascia itself is guna, the consciousness is you, but the fascia is this vibrant, what's that, piezoelectric
Yeah.
instinct kind of, or very quick communication. So when you're looking at a teeny thing, you're actually able to see huge things if you really look closely. And if you look at really huge things, you're actually able to see the teeny things clearly. And that's kind of fun.
And so being able to become agile at being at going into this idea of something like fascia, or into the idea of the very minuscule elements of the present moment that can absolutely capture your mind and your attention, and being able to be agile enough to flow in and out of sort of absorption with those elements, either the big things or the little things, and then also flow in and through the embodied experience of being in this crazy body, being in this insane world, or becoming hopefully a more sane world as people wake up a little bit, being in difficult situations, and that is where yoga is no longer used as an escape. And what we see and it's not only in modern yoga, in ancient yoga as well, that people would turn to yoga sort of for bliss states, or turn to yoga as it is this religious sort of ritual that I do. Or one of the things these days, and it's always been part of the tradition, is turning to yoga, say, for the siddhis. I'm going to get the siddhis, or I'm going to have a sense of enlightenment, or better yet, just an altered state of consciousness. And so you get a taste for these things, and then what happens is, the sort of ego function within you, or your mind, your reasoning mind, starts to codify whatever it is you've decided the benefit is, or the siddhi is that you want. And then it's this flip that happens when the yoga becomes the escape rather than a path towards something.
Mm-hmm. And it can be a sophisticated escape. Because I'm just thinking of a siddhi. I just want to become, what would be a siddhi that would be tempting? If I, meditate on a certain thing, I'll be able to operate. Well, for me, a siddhi would be able to
Do technology
yeah,
well.
yeah, to see my cell phone and not be, not have them
I
upgraded.
knew we were going to get there.
But no, in terms of the city, if I could control artificial intelligence, or if I could
Yeah.
gain the ability to travel to other planets
Yeah.
or something, then I could, and I tell myself, then I could be of such service to the planet Earth.
Yeah.
And when actually I crave the city so that I can become power and enjoy the power.
Yeah, or just enjoy I was thinking of astral projection, being
Yeah.
able to do that. That
And that's
sounds
a
kind of fun.
classic one,
Yeah.
that's talked about in
Yeah.
mythology in Asia.
Yeah.
Everybody is flying through the air or traveling in time. That would be
That would be
interesting.
nice. That would be nice.
And then you could go back and tell yourself not to
Not to do
that.
certain things. Save yourself some time
Yeah,
and heartache.
I've yet to do that. And so there's a real temptation with the cities, and a lot of, and I think, as one practices the things that one is tempted, I don't know if temptation is the right word, but one becomes interested in things that are really not in their faith. They're no longer interested in, or they become. I want to feel the breath patterns in my body, so that I can become like a breath astrologer, and this is called Swara Yoga. So, if somebody asks, in this way, I can convince people I'm omniscient. So somebody asks you a question, and this is something that it's a little bit overdone, but I feel exactly the breath pattern in my nostrils, and in the nostrils I feel the breath pattern in the rib cage and the diaphragm, and then on down into the pelvic floor, and then all through the chakra and nadi system. And based on some overly simplified things, I know whether to say yes or no, or I know the advice to give.
Cause and effect, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and so they're projecting cause and effect, where sometimes there is cause and effect on certain levels, but sometimes it's just like synchronicity, as Carl Jung would say, or it just happens to be there. And we always, overreach and then pay for it later. And so even if you have a really great religious system and you have the best mantras and the best yoga practice, at a certain point, because the everything will leave a type of samskara, then other things will come up and distract you and give you another opportunity to look really deeply. And it's just that practice, you get better and better at coming back into the present moment and coming back to what's important.
You do, unless you're distracted by your mind and by your concepts.
Yeah.
And that's when the yoga really becomes this system for escaping the moment that we're, that leads to these deeper experiences.
Yeah.
And so it really is, in terms of each one of us as practitioners, we've probably all had moments where the yoga is an escape. And I was thinking earlier when we were considering how we might talk about this a little bit, that really when you're looking at this idea of yoga as an escape, the idea of anything having to escape from anything means that you are imprisoned or contained, and really imprisoned by the yoga. So what is it?
Misperception of.
Yeah, what is it that is causing you within any given moment to be imprisoned? And what happens for all of us, moment by moment, day after day, is that we have these moments in each of our days where we become imprisoned by our idea of what we think, and we are then no longer able to be present. And so the whole idea of being having the yoga be an escape is really, what is it you're escaping from? And you're escaping from the moment at hand. So we had,
But just to play with the language, I want to escape from ignorance.
Yeah.
Because that's the cause of
Yeah.
suffering. And that's the
So
nature
that
of
could
language.
be the beneficial. Yeah.
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 And it's linguistic confusion, which is nama and rupa getting confused. And I want to escape from having to escape, and
Go down that rabbit hole.
yeah, but the rabbit holes are fun.
They're fun. They're good. We like rabbits.
Yeah.
But so for yourself to really look at what are the indicators, and as Richard was talking about a minute ago, if you're feeling stuck or dull within your daily life, but also within your practice, then that's an indicator that you might be, sort of escaping from what's actually arising within your motivation for being there, as well as what the yoga has to offer you. A dullness that prevents you or sort of gets in your way from looking again with enthusiasm and looking more closely, which is really what yoga is about.
Yeah.
Or it might be a fear that it's not going to work, or that something else is a problem, or a fear of trusting yourself.
Or I've been wasting my time.
Yeah.
Because yoga, so you're going off and you're spending all this time doing yoga and neglecting all these other things. Because, you could be doing something else. But you've ruined your normal life. But you failed at yoga. And this was actually one of Arjuna's classic fears, that he had blown it in both directions. And his friend said, no, you haven't. It's this love of other creatures that is what we're talking about.
And when you can, and in the end with Arjuna, what he was able to do, and what as practitioners perhaps we can do, is to look deeply both at what is this thing we're calling yoga. Look deeply at what it is. And then also look deeply at ourselves, swadhyaya, really examining ourselves closely. And that doesn't mean like going and standing in front of the mirror and falling in love with your image. It's really peeling away layers of misperception of mind, and of then all those things like fear and doubt and anger and lust and things that get in the way. And as you were saying earlier, the way to do that is to tap into the embodied experience. Because when you know that you are feeling normal and real and whole, like who you really know yourself to be, not a distortion of who you have become in your moments of neuroses.
Even in difficult situations.
Even in difficult situations.
Yeah.
That's the starting point from which you can start really examining, am I escaping things? Am I escaping life through yoga? Am I escaping yoga through yoga? Is there some difference between life and yoga? That's when those kinds of questions start to come up, and suddenly this whole absorption in my pain in my back, or my stress that's keeping me awake at night, those things start to melt, and they are not what the focus of awareness and mind and the embodied experience start to be, because you've gone deeply into who you really are and why you're really here. So that's this idea of really looking at, svadvaya, at yourself, and looking again, looking more deeply.
Yeah. So that's the classic in Kriya Yoga.
Yes, Kriya Yoga.
Yeah, tapas.
Tapas.
Which means to burn. That's practice. And it's too late. We're already burning, or to shine. Tapas, when you start
Polishing it.
Yeah, but then svadvaya is to look or to examine or to meditate on sva, or who you really are, and of course the Orthodox schools, they're more interested in maintaining the cultural order, and so they say svadvaya, and this is a modern interpretation actually, is to study the Vedas, which are interesting books. Mm-hmm. If you really study them, they're like, oh my. But they don't want you, so the Orthodox don't want you like, reading
self-help books.
Self-help books, or yeah. But they want you to be good and just be Orthodox.
Yeah.
But in Indian mythology, the Orthodox or the Brahminical caste is always getting challenged by demons or Brahmins who have gone bad, mm-hmm. and have made this huge mistake of just being interested in, having the power or having the getting themselves out of these bad situations. And so,
and it's, when that kind of thing starts to happen, the difficulty is that we lose sight of the truth within ourselves, the capacity to really be honest with ourselves about what our motivations are, what are, what it is we're wanting to achieve or to get relief from, etc. And it's not that it's necessarily bad to want to get relief from something. I'm thinking of a friend of ours we had a visiting teacher who came to town once many years ago, and there was this wonderful student who'd come to class, and she had 2 young kids, and this teacher had said, "Why are you all here?" And she said, "Well, people went around the room, I'm here to, tap into enlightenment and all these other things." And she said, "Oh, I'm just here because I am so tired of being around my children all day, and I just need a break from this." And this teacher went off the deep end, and this poor mother, who was really exhausted, was just, cowering in the side, because the teacher was saying, that is no reason to do yoga, and, you're avoiding your dharma.
Your duty, yeah.
And yet, what really, if you look at, that's a formula that came about in that interchange. But if you step back and sort of soften your grip of your mind on that situation, it was what really was going on with that mother and her situation that was causing this response, and what could she take care of that would then allow her to see the yoga not as an escape from that, but as something that would nourish her ability to be present. And that's the flip that happens, is, we can think, oh, I'm escaping. And even someone who's I'm just blissed out all the time, and yoga is wonderful, and I had this wonderful sitting retreat, and I had all these wonderful insights. And that's not inherently bad, but when you flip it and say, well, what is it really that you are avoiding? And it takes incredible self-discipline and self-honesty to look in the mirror and say, this is really beneath my stress, my suffering, my pain, and this is the root of it. Like we would with natural medicines these days, you go to the root rather than giving a pill to stop the
symptoms.
Disease. Yeah,
you want to get to
the root, and this is really where, as individuals, when you feel yourself kind of drifting off into the escape of yoga, where it's just a moment to say, up, as you were saying, to observe it, and then look more closely at the bigger context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And one thought,
The wheel of time.
the wheel of time. But one thought really is, here I go, with the yoga, the more we do it and the more I do it over time, and I've had, many different experiences with it. But when it feels really authentic and real, and I feel more authentic and real and more clear in the body, it just feels more ordinary and not, some special, extraordinary thing with neon lights or glitter. It's just something that is, it is a way of resonating. The yoga is a way of resonating with that sense of reality or truth that is so satisfying within oneself, which is really like the taste of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
I like the smell.
The smell. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
I think we're a little wiped out from our previous 3 weeks, but we really wanted to see this group because having a group of people who've come over the last few years since the pandemic started, and having you ask us questions and then giving us ideas about how can we answer some of the thoughts and questions that arise. It's been, greedily for us, it's been really wonderful.
It's been nourishing.
It's been nourishing. So we thank you for coming tonight. We will stick around a little bit for questions, but please keep practicing. Even if it's an escape, you'll go through a cycle where it'll come back to not being an escape.
A good escape.
Yeah. So thank you.